Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Alumni in Management series. Tonight, we are joined by André Renaudo, a business finance alumnus from right here at the Leon Hess Business School. Before we get going, I'd like to introduce Dean Raj Devasagayam with some opening remarks.
Welcome to the Alumni in Management series. This is a series of one-on-one conversations that's designed to bring in the expertise and experience of emergent leaders to our classrooms. We in the Leon Hess Business School believe that your learning outside the classroom is truly essential to supplement our learning inside the classroom. As you listen to the conversation this evening, focus in and relate it to your own experience, your own professional experience from jobs, from internships, and see what you can learn that would be of help to you right away, in the near future as you approach the job market, and in the distant future as you craft your own leadership path. My thanks to Professor Palazzolo for organizing this event. I must mention that he's a proud alum of Monmouth himself. My thanks also to the alumni for bringing in their expertise and experience, sharing it with us so generously, and most of all, for the time and effort you're putting in to giving back something to our institution. Thank you. Finally, I thank each one of you for attending. I hope you learned something new today that you can apply beginning tomorrow. Enjoy.
Thank you, Dean Devasagayam, for welcoming everyone to tonight's AIM series. Up next, to introduce himself, our guest speaker, André Renaudo, has actually recorded his own introduction. So let's listen in as Andre gives us a brief insight into his background.
Welcome to another session of Alumni in Management series. My name is André Renaudo, a Vice President within the Corporate Investment Bank at Barclays in New York, a 2011 Monmouth graduate, and a mentor within the Executive Mentoring Program for the Business School. I started my career within the mortgage industry and quickly pivoted to the British bank. Being at a universal bank, I've had the opportunity to work in many different offices, from London to New York to Wilmington, and I've had many great mentors during my career. For today, my intention is for you to take away two key learnings. One, the importance of developing and maintaining strong relationships. And secondly, building your development plan and your narrative.
Well, again, thank you for joining us, Andre. We would love to learn a little bit more about you outside of this brief introduction you provided us. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are, where'd you come from, where'd you go to school?
Nice. Welcome, everyone. I see we have, 33 participants on the call. So hopefully this resonates with a lot of people on this call. But I really, really happy to be here. I obviously went to Monmouth. I was a finance major within the business school. I went to Everything High School before Monmouth, and really grew up in a blue collar ish home. So my mom was in fashion, but moved to manufacturing, and my dad worked in facilities management. I'm the youngest in like 5 children, so really a lot of us, and by a lot, a huge gap really. So for me, I've had a lot of people in front of me, that are just working and trying to do their best. So it really set a level of standard for me in terms of how to drive things and in everything that I do and how to get things done. So that's carried to from high school to college to really my professional life. I actually fell in love with Monmouth without even knowing what Monmouth was. It was on my when I was applying for colleges. It was on my sister's. I kind of had all these different schools, out of state schools, and some local and state. And Monmouth wasn't on my list. It was on my sister's list, but she ended up not going. Uh, and I just kind of picked out the school and thought, oh, I've never heard of this. So let me go on for a campus visit to see what the school is like, and immediately fell in love with the school. Um, from the administrators to some of the staff, and I got a chance to meet a lot of different folks, not just from the admissions, but to the administration and some of the professors, that I just felt like it was a nice home away from home. And to be honest, it's felt like that. Even being out of school for so many years, it still feels like that, where I'm always happy to be on campus. So really, from earlier on, I learned a bit more of what culture I wanted. So I think I didn't really think about that back then, and not even when I graduated Monmouth, did I really think about that. But the culture and where I choose who I follow in terms of leaders, to what company I work with, what team I work on, has always been it's always been a case of I'm putting somewhat culture at the forefront of those decisions. So knowing now, like I now know, like culture has played such a huge part in my life, in my decision making, for everything that I do. All right, back to you, Joe.
I got to tell you, it's interesting, Andre, because stories kind of mirror here. Uh, my father was also in facility management, and I also learned about Monmouth as an entity that you could go to school at, because now I don't have an older sister, but I have an older brother who used to, hang around Monmouth, and it was a school of interest for him. So that's how I found out about it. So I can appreciate those elements of your story. Tell us a little bit about your time here at Monmouth. Tell us about how, what did you study? Does anything stand out? Tell us a little bit about that part of your story. And I think I have you on mute again. So if you can unmute, thank you.
The the interesting thing is, I Monmouth was like one of the, like, I can go and so we joke a lot about this, actually. So I was in a finance chair for the student government. I was the editor for the yearbook for all 4 years, and I was in a fraternity. So I can go from a just extracurricular activity perspective. I can go to to student services, and for whatever meeting, if one person is running late, I can speak to anyone in that office about some sort of agenda, some sort of topic. So I think that's how I've been. Like, that was my Monmouth experience. I was super involved across a lot of different aspects of Monmouth, because I wanted to be part of the full culture and contribute to the full culture. But I was a finance major. I made a lot of connections to that as well. I think one of my favorite classes that I've taken was management and leadership with Mission Kiba, and I just remember vividly one of the stories that we covered around Johnson and Justin, and around leadership, accountability, and transparency around, and that just resonated a lot with me overall. So it's kind of like one of those things that when I look at leaders and folks that I kind of work with, is I want to see like those sort of qualities as well. Another professor that that really challenged me, even though I did not have their class, was um, Dr. Asim Bey in the economics, and also Stephen Pressman as well. Um, I also worked at the as a researcher for the economics department. So I did a lot of work for SMB and Pressman in terms of researching some of their articles that they're publishing or lectures to books that they're working on. So it was good to get a perspective from a research lens, kind of build some of my research sort of skills, but also just thinking about the economy and more of the world and how people see things and how that plays from a financial perspective.
Very interesting, Andre. You chose two incredible Monmouth University professors. Both have retired at this point, but I'm glad to hear about the impact they made on you in your educational journey. I know they made a tremendous impact on many students before you and many students after you as well. I want to shift the conversation just for a moment here. I could listen to your educational journey all day, but I'm looking in the Zoom room here, and we have a nice mix of professors. We have MBA students. I see juniors and seniors here, a few sophomores. Some of these seniors are a few weeks away from graduating in December. Some are a few months away from graduating in May. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about your early career path, starting with any internships that you might have had moving into your early career.
Yeah, so I interestingly, I think having the two core experiences and like I would say that prepared me for graduation and moving to like professional setting was one, the being a research assistant for the school, but two, the extracurricular activities that I've done. And I think we undervalue and like we take those things for granted a bit, but there's so much to learn through those from either relationships that we're building. And I mean, I was financial, I was responsible for managing a $500,000 in budgeting, right? There's no other internship or job that can offer me that level of kind of direct experience with managing a budget.
I can't imagine any internship giving an intern a $500,000 budget. So you're right.
So yeah, so I would say probably my first career mistake was not doing an internship until my senior year of college, and I think that probably set me back a little bit. Not, it wasn't impossible to find a role or get a job, but I think it just when I look at those are information I didn't know back then, right? I think Mom has done such a great job from a career perspective, helping prepare students, and even one reason why I mentor within the business school is to kind of help push and shed some light into the industry and go into the corporate environment. But really, I waited until senior year to do my first internship. And really, that's the time away from my senior year experience when I could be relaxing and getting a little bit, not relaxing, but enjoying the full experience as a senior for, graduate. But instead, I was kind of more focused.
So I think you were in the midst of talking to us a little bit about the early part of your career, and I was just talking to the students and the guests here about how we're going to dig into that a little bit. So maybe tell us a little bit more about what was it like making the transition from Monmouth University into the professional world at Barclays?
Yeah. So I think where I last left off is around sort of the overall experiences more I've gotten from being a student and just running certain, like, from finance chair to running the yearbook. But the internship I had really was more around the analytical data sort of driven. I worked for a private equity research sort of firm. So but like going into my first role so I went from mortgage industry, which was more around like servicing. And so we had to do a rotation effectively where it was from servicing to collections to escrow to like different parts
of when you work for a mortgage company, and it was also working with a bank. So working for a mortgage company and a bank, just going through a rotation of all different kind of departments. But I didn't even get a chance to finish my rotation because that's when I learned about an opportunity to go to London and where I kind of moved to. So it was kind of just by I would say by luck. It was actually a opportunity that Carl Gordonier referred me to. And I think some students I know Carl retired, what, 2 years ago or a year ago, but probably still comes around and is still very involved with Monmouth. But really, I think the biggest transition for me in that working is moving from going from, as students, we write papers and we try to fluff as much as possible, right? Try to get as much as
Yes,
possible
that's true.
just to make it to that, 10 page or whatever. But it was going into a corporate setting where you no longer had time for that. You need to get your point across in 2 or 3 lines, and that was it. And that was like a very hard transition for me um, to get into. But I think once you learn that, it really serves you well. And it was good as well. My first role was more around projects. It wasn't very much a day-to-day. I come in and I have to do these 20 tasks, right? It was very much the day you can come in with intention of what you wanted to work on, and it will completely be blown over because there's an issue in something and you just had to focus on that. So it was more presentation based, more understanding, and really how do you summarize complex problems into very quick, easy things for management. So it was very much like that. So it was just like that was a big transition in terms of coming from a 10-page paper and trying to fluff your way through half of it and really have the core content towards the end versus trying to get to your point right away and capturing that kind of audience. So I'll
Andre,
probably say that's one of the big kind of checks for me.
Andre, I'm going to take this video and I'm going to play it for all of my BM225 students, some of whom are here, which is a course in how you be more concise and clear in your writing. How do you take that 10-page academic mindset and boil it down to a paragraph?
Yeah.
that's what it's like out there. So that's what it was like in the beginning of your professional career. Tell us about how you progressed within the Barclays organization. You've been there for a long time. So what changed in the first couple of years, and how did you begin to progress in the next couple of years to get to where you are now?
Yeah, I think it's another example of when I go back to the culture kind of point I made earlier. Barclays is very open in terms of internal mobility and locations and kind of the work that you work on. And that's one of the things I realized I very much value within the company. I get bored very easily. So for me, I have to work on a specific solution. I have to be thinking constantly on what's next. And if I get into a point where I'm just working, I know it well, then I get very bored very quickly. So one of the things for me at Barclays, I've been fortunate that so I joined a role where it was focused on relationship management. But one of the things I realized was while this was a fantastic role and I loved it and I did not want to leave it, one of the things I was lacking is the technical experience. Part of that role required me to be an escalation point. Imagine being a first year analyst and someone escalates an issue to you, and you're thinking, okay, it's only, and I'm just making a number up, right? It's only 200,000 shares. Is it really that bad, right? And then behind it, there's $6 billion that's locked in. And it's kind of getting to understand the dynamic and what's the impact of a lot of things that come across my desk. So I moved into a treasury role.
where I was responsible for managing sort of our cash position in the US, looking at projecting how much, literally how much in US dollar would we have in cash, right, at the Fed. And that was my sole responsibility. And based on that, you come up with a calculation in the beginning of the day. And based on that, you're monitoring and you're responding throughout the day on what you should do differently, right? And again, I got into a point where I've learned enough, I knew enough, and I started working more on projects. And the thing with Treasury is there's a lot of always business change, restructures, regulations, and it's just like constant. So I kind of got a lot more involved in projects and thinking more about what does that mean from a treasury perspective? What does that mean from a operations perspective? And how do we then adjust what we need to do? So then I got to a point where I've got so much of that. Then I moved on into a more of a business manager type of role, still within the same organization, but now looking at it, supporting the global head to kind of think more about how is he managing his business, right? His team. And we are for those, like a treasury function is usually sits within like a cost, right? It manages costs. It's not a profit generating business. It's not a profit generating kind of side of things, but how do we manage costs? And part of that is we are providing a service to the rest of the organization. So I had to pull together pretty much that was probably the pivotal point in my career. I needed, as part of a structural reform in the UK, we had to stand up two distinct businesses, one from a kind of international, the more investment, more risk kind of type of business, right? And then the other one being more of a retail sort of mindset business and therefore very retail focused. But how do you protect customers in the retail side versus the more institutional, more complex sort of clients and risk taking sort of activities? So now we had to stand up two different businesses. But at the end of the day, where does all of your operations and infrastructure sits? Because the point of the setting up the two different businesses is that they're not reliant on each other if something goes wrong. So then we had to set up a third business of the kind of execution side of things where you house all your infrastructure, your resources, because then they can provide services to both businesses without if any of those two main businesses kind of goes under, then business, things are still operating as usual. So treasury functions sat in that kind of cost, right? In that kind of infrastructure providing services. So my job was to define what our services were that we were providing, but also coming up with the metrics. How do we measure our performance? How do we think about what are the SLAs that we are agreeing with each and every different business for that? So I was responsible for kind of standing that up for our treasury operations sort of side of things. And then that got moved to bigger. And after that, to be honest, my career just kind of really took off after that.
And it sounds like you got a great chance to prove yourself and to show your value to the company. And it seems like the right people picked up on that and said, "We need this guy. This is the one. This is the one we want." Tell us a little bit
to be
about
honest,
that.
I kind of volunteer myself a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it went from a meeting with the global head. So we were already tight resource, and it was a meeting with the global head of, what am I thinking? What does he need help with? To, oh yeah, I'll be interested in this. But it was very clear from him that if I take this on, I am the key person for this. Like I am on the line for this. And I think I do well in that. And I think really, if anything, I would give from an advice perspective is you need to know what are your triggers overall and what keeps, what gets you going, and being honest with yourself, and knowing what those kind of internal triggers and those motivational sort of side of things, what makes you actually get up and be happy to go to work? Because you need to think about how can you do more of those things. We're always going to have work that we don't want to do. And no matter what the role is, you're never going to have a perfect role where you don't do things that you don't want to do. But it's recognizing that you are doing the things that you do want to do, and only a little bit of the things that you don't want to do, and that's the cost of working, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, now I have to ask you the obvious question, Andre, because you brought it up. What are the things that motivate you to keep getting up and going to work for Barclays for so long? I mean, you've been there for a while. There's something about it. There's got to be something about it. What is it that's motivating you to stay at it?
Is a culture, is the people, is the it's definitely has a Barclays is a very prestigious kind of organization, but I think part of the culture is also how people work together to kind of solve for problems. It has that community aspect of the company that I just, for that reason and that reason only, I kind of kept going to with Barclays. And one of the things that I find fascinating is working from London back to New York to Delaware and back to New York. It was a consistent culture. So it's very hard to, when you're being provided opportunities, you're identifying what you wanted to do, and people actually believe in you, and they say, yeah, go for it. Yep, let me take you on that journey as well. And then you have I know people I can count on. And I've had some great mentors at Barclays. So there's facet of, you have your mentors, you have your sponsors, and like your mentors are, here they are giving you advice, but they may not necessarily be involved in your sort of day job. And then you also have your sponsors and people that probably have connected with you at some point because of a project or whatever it's been. And you've shown them something that they want, almost like they're buying in and they're investing in you. And those are the people that, when there are meetings happening behind the closed doors, you're not in the room, and who are those people that are speaking on your behalf? So I've had a lot of great mentors and sponsors at Barclays to kind of keep me and provide that support system. I mean, when you get a chance to work on different projects and work on some of the most largest sort of restructures and regulations, I get really inspired by thinking about problems and trying to solve problems, and how to kind of get through that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you said there that are having me thinking. It is so hard to have culture cross an ocean, that people work one way in London and the same identical way here in the States. That's really a feather in Barclays cap. So good for them. I have a question. You mentioned your mentors and the sponsors you have for you. Just out of curiosity, are these folks that you sought out within the organization, or is it a formal program? How'd you get paired up?
Well, funny enough, I actually do not like formal programs in matching.
Oh.
I personally much prefer more of an organic sort of conversation. And hopefully no one at Barclays watches this, but I would say the biggest thing I do, so we get access to, internet alert, like the news alerts within the company, the way I identify people I want to meet with normally. Obviously, the first one is people I've worked with or have listened to or seen. So that's more of a direct sort of, I've seen something right away. The second bit has been when I look at sort of employee resource groups and different events that are happening, whether it's a talk on gender or a talk on diversity or something around technology, it could be any topic, right? I I attend those as well, and I hear and see who I want to kind of, based on some of those interactions, my go-to would be, I would probably have a meeting with them, reach out, right, to one and connect just to kind of learn a little bit more about their background, their interests, and their direction. And based on that meeting, the same way they'll probably make a call on me, I'm also making a call on them. And is that someone I want to continue and have a conversation with? Or is that someone, it's great, but for now, I don't need to proceed any further. So I think there are like, I may have 10 of those meetings, and maybe there's one of those individuals that I really connect with. And I remember going to, um, I had, I went to a meeting with someone, um, and very senior, and work in the CEO office. And at some point during that meeting, they took out their flow chart of their overall sort of, they look at the region. They look after the region and every business that's in that region and every legal entity like that's in that region. And they pull out that flow chart and what that means and how that goes. And honestly, that really resonated well with me. And we've kept in contact since. And that was back in 2017, and we're still in contact today.
Wow.
Right. And
it's a long time.
And they had a huge part in my next role. In the current role I'm in, they had a huge part in me getting that role and kind of, suggesting, hey, like you probably should think about this. So like you never know who you meet, what, like it doesn't have to be something where it doesn't have to be transactional, right? And I think this is the going back to the point around relationship building. It does not have to be transactional. Like, oh, I need a job, and that's when I kind of reach out to someone. I avoid those scenarios. For me, I make sure I connect with people before I need something.
I like that you had a long, or you're still in a long-term interaction with someone that you met at one of these events. The lesson here, I think, for the students, and I've got a question here that was given to me by the students before we started. The lesson for the students here is, hey, when your company hosts a training and something, go to it and talk to people. Don't just be a wallflower. Interact with folks there. Learn from the people who are there. Yeah, speaking of the students, I did ask some folks for some questions before we started here, and I'm looking at see who's here. There's a couple of sophomores, a couple of juniors, and they're in internship mindsets right now. So what might you recommend to them on how they could potentially get an internship in your industry? Maybe not so much at Barclays, although if there's something available, let us know. But how could they get themselves in at the early stages in your industry?
Well, I think as a sophomore, you can't ever do a better time. So good for you to be thinking about that. And I think really looking at what companies are you thinking of, and really find out from those companies what are their recruitment schedule like. And I can tell you, usually this fall, like around this time, is when people are applying and roles are becoming available for internships for 2024. And really, when you think about that cycle of you get an internship now, you might secure an internship going into for summer of 2024. Hopefully that goes well and they actually come back for after you graduate or come back for another internship, right? And then by the time you're a senior, they're now offering you a job to join them as a graduate. So I think that is when you're a sophomore, junior, that's really a good time to look at which companies are you thinking about and find out what their recruitment cycles are, because they do host a lot of different recruitment events that virtual to learn more about the company, different type of roles available. So this is the right time right now to try to get in front of the recruiters and stuff.
Good recruitment cycles.
Recruitment shout out to my and as I say that, we are indeed. I actually just got an email, I think a day or two ago, about roles that are now available for my business for summer, for summer internships. So
timing is right. If you want to forward them over to me, I'll make sure the students get a look at them, and maybe you can hire a Monmouth kid for an internship. Who knows?
Yeah, hopefully.
Another question some of the students asked me before we got here was just to pick your brain for just a minute or two about like what's going on out there in the world. What's going on? What are the things that people on your team in your industry are paying attention to that maybe we don't see here at Monmouth University? Maybe the students don't see it because, as you know, our students are very busy studying, of course. So they're very don't laugh. It's true.
Not fluffing their 10-page papers.
Writing 10-page papers. So students are busy. You remember you were a student a couple of years back. They're busy doing things. What are the things going on out there in the world that maybe our students should be aware of, that maybe you and your team are aware of and keeping an eye on?
You know what? I mean, I am in a very, very specific part of the organization where my responsibility is to look after treasury. We provide banking services, transaction banking services to corporate. And so the folks that we're dealing with on a regular basis are CFOs and treasurers of multinational companies. And when you think about just from my perspective, and the reason why I love treasury so much is the fact that I think it's such an underrated kind of area in terms of if I ask probably the poll, we have what, 34 students on this call. If I ask these 34 students, what you want to go into finance, what role do you want to be? I promise you it would be either accounting, it would be I want to be in sales, I want to be a trader, I want to do investment banking,
Investment banking.
and that's probably going to be it, right? But there are so many at a company, at a huge company, even in a small company, there's so many different roles that you can leverage finance into. Treasury being one of those, right? And when you think about treasury and responsible for really managing the liquidity of a company, from stress testing, scenarios, modeling, to thinking about how do you manage your balance sheet? How do you manage your cash position? How do you remain resilient? That's when you ask what are on people's and companies' mind, regardless of where you're at, that's definitely a top of mind topic, right? And yet that's such an underrated role that not a lot of people think about. Oh, you know what? I want to be a treasurer, or I want to work and kind of manage assets and liability and really do the reporting. I want to manage capital, right? Not a lot of people think about that type, but you gain so much exposure and so much knowledge from that. So if not the fact that I've done roles in treasury, but I would recommend that folks kind of look back and expand their thought process beyond investment banking and beyond trading or sales, because there's a lot more and those roles can offer. And moving in, when you have some of those foundational sort of background, you are, in my mind, very golden. And if you look at the industry right now, right, a lot of the bank crisis collapse we've seen in the beginning of the year, what does that go back to? Managing liquidity, right? At the end of the day, is managing liquidity.
Yeah, there's such a big, broad world of finance out there, and Andre, it's like you're talking to our students, and maybe you get this from the mentoring that you do with Monmouth, which we thank you for. Maybe that's what you hear from our finance students, that they want to do one of those 4 gigs, but there's so many other jobs out there so thank you for reinforcing that. Before I ask you maybe for some parting thoughts and some advice to the students, I just have uh, just a question to lead into that. What are some of the things that maybe you see as opportunities for these young folks who are going to get ready to graduate and get out into the professional world? In other words, are there gaps that you see out there that these young people can maybe fill, not just for your company, but in the professional world overall?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's saying technology is obviously a huge component, right? And I don't think we don't all need to be technologists. But
having some of that basic advance thinking about, like sometimes, and you know what, and I never considered this until an old manager made a comment about this, where we were looking at resumes and a student put proficient in Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, and blah, blah, blah. And the first comment was, well, of course, you're graduating from college. Of course, you should be proficient in these things. Those are basics, right? But I think that doesn't mean you can't put that. But what more are you doing in terms of advancing your knowledge in those arenas, right? Are you learning advanced Excel functions that helps you? Because regardless how much of technology we're applying right now from a company perspective, and that's across the board, there's still a level of manual. And as a student, if you could come in and you find out your team is doing this one thing on a spreadsheet, and you're like, I can do a little bit, like add a few rules or do a few functions, and before you know it, we save 20 minutes of the day or an hour of the day. Those are easy things that add value to your team, and it allows your team to kind of focus more on the work that you probably would be interested in, right? So I think thinking about what else can you do. All right, you've graduated in finance, you graduated in accounting, but are you taking on some of those just advanced sort of Excel, advanced sort of Word? I'm not even gonna get into AI or anything around that, right? But just like, are you advancing your kind of knowledge base in some of those Microsoft products? I think is a key area.
Seeing some of the students who are here with us, I know that some of them have actually brought up AI to me, and they've gone out and gotten certifications on LinkedIn to be AI certified. And so, technology is a good idea. And you make a good point, Andre, about how over the years you see an evolution of what's listed on a resume, from proficient in Microsoft Office, including Word, PowerPoint, Excel, this, that, the other one. And now I start to see proficient in Google Docs, because now we move to the cloud-based version. I wonder what's that going to be in a couple of years, proficient in ChatGPT and all the different versions of AI that are going to be out there. So it's a really good point. And the students out there today should really be finding ways to do more. So I appreciate your point about doing more than the bare minimum. Like,
Yeah.
have you learned the advanced functions? Smart point.
Yeah. And then the next bit is probably hone in on your research skills, right? I think you can go, in my mind, you're, as a student going into a company, you're going to learn. And yeah, you will be competing with people. One of the things that you'll be competing with people that have done 2 or 3 internships before you even have done just one. And how do you then differentiate yourself from a student with multiple internships, or has the caliber, like the support system to get them, into a company? How do you differentiate yourself between that? And I think it's about showing, one, your willingness to learn, and not just think about, I am one of those managers that, yeah, someone may or may not have a particular skill, but if they can demonstrate to me that they can learn and they will learn, and I don't have to push them, I would probably favor someone like that with those qualities over someone that just come with the skills, right? Because if someone in the skills just, they need someone to tell them what to do and how to do it each and every time, then it, like, is the person really learning?
They also become more for you to have to manage. Now you're not just managing their work, but you're trying to manage an inspiration to learn. So it's a really good piece of advice for everyone out there listening. Show a desire to learn, and then go out there and learn more. And following that really great advice, it almost seems superfluous at this point to ask you for some parting words of advice for the students. But that's the point where we're at here at the end of our conversation. Do you have any other words of wisdom or advice for the students that you want to impart before we call it a night?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first and foremost, if you do analysis of yourself, right, and your support system. If you, and I call it board of directors, and that's widely known as well as board of directors. But who are the people that are in your circle that you can count on, right? And if you don't feel like you have that group of people, it could be Joe, right? It could be Joe. It could be someone in the industry. If you know you are in accounting and you want a role in accounting, do you know anyone in that particular sector? Do you, and how far is that reach? And sometimes it's not just about looking at a transactional, oh, I want an internship, therefore I'm going to connect with someone and they're going to link me with an internship. That's not how it works, right? You may be fortunate that they may help you with some introductions, but it's about building relationships with people, to showing them that you are reliable. You can actually, why should someone put their name on the line for you? Really ask yourself that question. So it's about forming some of those relationships and really establishing yourself in those relationships, and things will come along the way. So think about that for directors. Do you have those maybe 2 or 3, 5 individuals that you can count on for advice, for networking, for connections, for potential job prospects? Do you have those? So if you don't have those, start thinking of how do you develop that. But really start networking, right? Going to these different events. And when you do meet someone that you find interesting, start thinking about how do you connect with them and start building relationships with them over time. And that's really how in my mind, a true mentorship works, right? Like it's not just a one time or small, yeah, there will be those individuals, but think about forming longer term relationships.
Excellent, excellent advice, Andre. Thank you for sharing it with our students. Have a personal board of directors. Begin getting involved in professional networking. Get a mentor. This is great advice for anyone who's listening. Thank you again, Andre, for joining us tonight. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your career success with our students. Thank you for being a volunteer for Monmouth University, and we appreciate you spending your night with us tonight.
Thank you, everyone.